Turning my $1.50 tech deck into an $150 Pro Fingerboard. Day 1. I spent the last 2 weeks taking one part off of my tech deck every day and seeing if I could still kickflip on it. And now that the trucks, wheels, and grip tape have been taken off, I wanted to see what it would be like to put on Pro Fingerboard parts onto this plastic tech deck. Most Pro Fingerboards, like this one I have here, use a wooden deck, so I was curious to see if you could still make a decent fingerboard with a plastic deck. I got this tech deck on sale at Walmart for $1.49, which was a whole $3 off, so it was a pretty good deal. So the goal is to keep adding Pro Fingerboard parts onto it until it's worth $150. By the way, I'm Canadian, and all the parts that I'm going to be using are from the States, so it definitely costs a little bit extra to get it shipped from the US. So the first upgrade we're going to make to this deck is putting on a fresh sheet of foam grip tape, because the sandpaper grip tape that tech deck gives you really isn't that great, and we're definitely not going to be reusing this other foam grip tape. I'm going to be using the Slush Cult That tape, and I got a 5-pack of it for $14. And since I'm only going to be using one sheet of grip tape, we can divide that price by 5, which equals about $2.80. So that brings us to a total of $4.29. But now I've got to ask myself, can I still kickflip? This grip tape made it so much easier than trying to kickflip on just the sandpaper grip tape or with no grip tape at all. But I wasn't used to it at first. It was gripping so much that I was just flinging the board all over the place. I also kept doing pressure flips for some reason, and my front finger would completely miss the board.
That's an air ball.
So after a few more failed attempts, I finally landed a good one, but we gotta do 2 to make it true. So then I landed a few more sketchy ones before I finally landed a nice one and rolled away clean. Day 2. Yesterday we added some foam grip tape to the board, which cost $2.80, which brought us to a total of $4.29. So today we're gonna be adding on the most expensive part of the board, the trucks. I got these beautiful 32mm Gold Edition dynamic trucks that cost me $67. But we're only gonna be adding one truck today, so we can cut that in half and add it to our total. I also got a pack of Fingerboard truck hardware that cost me $7, and it comes with 8 screws that I'll be using to connect the board to the trucks, 4 bolts to keep each of the wheels on, and another 2 bolts to hold the trucks together. So if we divide that $7 by each of our 14 parts, that means each part is about 50 cents. And since we're only going to be using one screw to attach our truck today, that brings us to a total of $38.29. So then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? Having my truck spin all around made it really hard, and I was having a difficult time even getting it to flip over. But after I landed in Primo,
Oh no.
eventually I got a decent one and was able to roll away, but we gotta do 2 to make it true. So after I landed on it upside down a bunch of times, I finally landed a clean one and rolled away. Day 3. Now that we've got one screw holding on our truck, all we need to do is add one more diagonally across from it to really secure the truck onto the board. This board is already getting pretty expensive, and in total it's worth $38.29. Luckily for us, each of these screws only cost 50 cents, so that brings us to a total of $38.79. And now I just gotta put this bolt back on, and I dropped it. So then I had to ask myself the ultimate question, can I still kickflip? And somehow I managed to land a perfect one first try, but we gotta do 2 to make it true. And of course, after landing it first try, I couldn't land a kickflip to save my life. But this foam grip tape made it so much easier, and actually having my truck secured onto the board gave me a lot more control. So after I landed what looked more like a kick flop than a kick flip, I finally landed a good one and rolled away clean. Day 4. So now that we've got foam grip tape on the board, and we've got one of our Pro Fingerboard trucks on there, it's time to start putting on the second truck. This board is already worth $38.79, and we're going to be adding on the other expensive truck, which costs $33.50. And we can't forget about the screw that actually attaches the truck to the board, which is going to cost us another 50 cents, which brings us to a total of $72.79. So now that we've got one truck that's secured onto the board and another truck that's only hanging on by one screw, I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? Having one truck that was spinning all over the place was making it really difficult, and then the whole truck just fell off. So after I screwed the truck back on, I kept landing on it upside down. And then I landed this one that was completely sideways, so I didn't really want to count it because it was pretty sketchy. But eventually I landed a perfect kickflip, but we gotta do 2 to make it true. So after I landed a few more sketchy sideways kickflips, I finally landed a good one and rolled away. Day 5. Today we're gonna be adding a second screw to this truck, so we'll finally have 2 secure trucks on the board. This board is already worth $72.79, but luckily these screws are only worth 50 cents, so that brings us to a total of $73.29. Which made me realize that we're already almost halfway to making this board worth $150, and we haven't even added any of the wheels yet. But then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? I thought that finally having 2 trucks on the board was going to make this challenge easier, but they're still super loose, so I was flinging the board all over the place. I kept landing what looked more like a kick flop than a kick flip, but then I started to get the hang of it, and I managed to land 5 in a row. None of them were super clean though, and I really wanted to get one more clean one, and if you've watched my series before, then you know the rules. You gotta do 2 to make it true. So after I landed on the board primo twice in a row,
Oh no!
I finally got that clean kickflip I was looking for and rolled away. Day 6. So now that we've got foam grip tape on the board and we've got both of our trucks, it's time to start adding the wheels. These wheels are Blue Indigo Ultra 2.0 Maple wheels that cost $42.99. And since we're only going to be adding on one wheel today, we can divide that by each of the 4 wheels, which means each wheel is about $10.75. And we can't forget the bolt that actually keeps the wheel on the truck, which is going to cost us another 50 cents. And that brings our board to a total of $84.54. So now I have to ask myself, can I still kickflip? Having only one wheel on the board was definitely weird, and I felt like I had to lean onto one side so I could use it properly. But after I landed in primo,
Oh no!
I kept landing a bunch of kickflips, but they were all pretty sketchy. Eventually though, I was able to get a really nice one that I caught in the air and rolled away. But we still gotta do 2 to make it true. So after a bunch more failed attempts, I landed 2 super clean ones back to back and rolled away. Day 7. Now that we've got one wheel on the back truck, it's time to add on the other wheel. Right now this board costs $84.54, and we'll be adding a new wheel onto it, which will be $10.75. And we can't forget about the bolt that actually holds the wheel onto the truck, which is going to be another 50 cents, which brings us to a total of $95.79. But then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? The board was starting to feel a little bit more normal now that I had 2 wheels on the back truck, but both the trucks are still super loose, so I was flailing the board all over the place. Eventually though, I was able to get a really clean kickflip that I caught in the air and rolled away. But we still got to do 2 to make it true. So after I kept landing on the board upside down over and over again, and I landed a bunch of sketchy kickflips, I finally got another super clean one that I caught in the air and rolled away. Day 8. Now that we've got both of our trucks on the board and we've got both wheels on the back truck, it's time to start adding wheels to the front truck. This board is already worth $95.79, and each wheel is worth $10.75, which means we're already over $100. And we can't forget the bolt that actually holds the wheel onto the truck, which is another 50 cents, which brings us to a total of $107.04. So then I had to ask myself the ultimate $100 question. Can I still kickflip? Now that I have 3 wheels on my board, I was starting to get my kickflips a lot more consistent, even if they did look more like a kick flop than a kick flip. Eventually though, I was able to land a clean one that I was really happy with, but we gotta do 2 to make it true. And of course, after I landed one good one, I couldn't land a kickflip to save my life. I kept failing over and over and over again, or I would just land super sketchy looking kickflips, until finally I landed another clean one and rolled away. Day 9. Today we're going to be adding on the last wheel onto the front truck, but even with 3 wheels on our board, we've already spent $107.04. So since each wheel costs $10.75, and the bolt that keeps the wheel on the truck costs another 50 cents, that brings us to a total of $118.29. So then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? Now that we have all 4 wheels on the board, it was starting to feel a lot easier, and I was able to land 3 in a row, even if they did look more like kick flops than kick flips. Then I just kept landing on the board upside down over and over and over again until I finally landed a clean one and rolled away. But we gotta do 2 to make it true. So then I kept landing a bunch of kick flips in a row, but they were all super sketchy until I finally landed a good one and rolled away clean. Day 10. So even though we've got both of our trucks attached to the board, they're still super loose because they have no bushings in them. So today we're gonna start by adding this bottom bushing to the back truck. I got this pack of dynamic bushings for $8.49, and it comes with 2 top bushings and 2 bottom bushings, 1 pair for each truck. So if we divide that $8.49 by the 4 bushings that we got, that means that each bushing is worth $2.12. This board is already worth $118.29, and we can't forget the bolt that actually holds the trucks together, which was another 50 cents, which brings us to a total of $120.91. So now I have to ask myself the ultimate question, can I still kickflip? Even with only 1 bushing in the back truck, the board was starting to feel way more normal. And after a failed attempt, I was able to get a really nice kickflip. But we still got to do 2 to make it true. But after only 2 more fails, I was able to land another super clean kickflip and roll away. Day 11. Yesterday we added the bottom bushing onto the back truck, so now it's time to add the top bushing onto the back truck so we can finally have a decently tight truck. This board is already worth $120.91, and each of the bushings cost $2.12, which brings us to a total of $123.03. So then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? Having the front truck still be super loose was really throwing me off, and I kept landing on the board either upside down or I would miss completely with my front finger.
That's an airball!
But after a while I started to get the hang of it, and I landed on a few sketchy ones before I landed a super clean one that I caught in the air. But we gotta do 2 to make it true. So then after I landed primo twice in a row,
Oh no!
I finally got another clean one and rolled away. Day 12. Yesterday we added the top bushing onto the back truck, so now we finally have at least 1 tight truck. So now it's time to start adding bushings to the front truck. This board is already worth $123.03, and each bushing costs $2.12, and we can't forget about the bolt that actually keeps the trucks together, which costs another 50 cents. So in total, that brings this board to $125.65. But then I had to ask myself, can I still kickflip? This board is starting to feel a lot more normal now, and I was getting my kickflips way more consistent. But of course, I still somehow managed to land primo on the board 3 times in a row.
Oh no!
But after a few more failed attempts, I was finally able to get a good kickflip and roll away. But we gotta do 2 to make it true. So after I landed a bunch of kickflips sideways, I finally landed a clean one and rolled away. Day 13. Yesterday we added the bottom bushing onto the front truck, so today we're gonna be finally adding on the last bushing onto the front truck. This board already cost $125.65, and each of the bushings cost $2.12, which brings us to a total of $127.77. So then I had to ask myself the ultimate question, can I still kickflip? Now that the board's pretty much all put together, it was feeling really good, and I was getting my kickflips super consistent. I was landing some decent kickflips, but then I finally did a super clean one that I caught nice and high in the air. But we gotta do 2 to make it true. So then after that streak of landing a bunch in a row, I was just completely missing the board with my front finger for some reason.
That's an air ball!
But then I got another clean one that I caught in the air and rolled away. Day 14. So now that our board is completely put together, the only thing left to do is to add 2 more screws to each of the trucks. And with each of the 4 screws costing 50 cents each, that brings us to a total of $129.77. But wait a second, I thought this challenge was turning a $1.50 tech deck into an $150 Pro Fingerboard. And that's when I remembered the dreaded cost of shipping, which, because I live in Canada and all of these parts are from the States, cost me another $20. So after all the calculations, we ended up turning a $1.49 tech deck into a $149.70 Pro Fingerboard. And that's before taxes. So now I gotta ask myself one final time, can I still kickflip? At this point, my kickflips were feeling super consistent, and even though I wasn't getting them perfect every time, I was still able to land on them. But the question I really wanted to answer at the beginning of this challenge is, can you make a tech deck into a Pro Fingerboard? And I'd say absolutely yes. Although most Pro Fingerboards do use a wooden deck, this plastic tech deck actually holds up really well and has a great shape. And once you start to add things like Pro trucks and Pro wheels onto the board, it starts to feel really good. But I'd say the most important thing that actually makes your tech deck feel super professional is adding a sheet of foam grip tape. A lot of the parts that I added onto this fingerboard are super expensive, but if you're looking for a cheap way to upgrade your fingerboard, definitely look into some foam grip tape. It makes it so much easier to do tricks, and you can actually pop your tricks high in the air and catch them, which I personally find a lot harder to do with the sandpaper grip tape that Tech Deck gives you. So thanks so much for watching this entire series, and follow me at HunkFB if you want to see more fingerboard tutorials or content like this.